Hello and welcome to Ben the EA Song of Ice and Fire podcast. I am Sir Matt, the Bud Knight.
And I am Ser Ezra, the Watchful, and we are back with another exclusive Patreon episode here for you guys. We want to say thank you to everyone who's supporting us here on Patreon. You guys are the best. And so you know what, Sir Matt? You decided, my friend, to read a few things to me to get me fired up, to make sure that I'm able to continue podcasting tomorrow.
Yeah, man, let me tell you guys something. So, my dive back into Game of Thrones, more hardcore, because, Ez and I, we Star Wars, we did all these different things. But I've been spending more time, and a lot of this had to do with, I didn't have power for like a week, right?
Yeah.
And so I was able to, I just going to listen to chapters and do some research and do some reading. And there's a lot of theories, a lot of characters we haven't talked about before. The theory we're talking about today is one we've talked about before, but I had never made this connection. And one of the things I've been really enjoying doing is going back and looking at theories that were created before the show. Because then you start to get some of these ideas and concepts that are not influenced by how the show is going to go. And there are people speculating only based upon the books. And so I think that's really interesting. So they only have, they don't have even Fire and Blood or World of Ice and Fire didn't exist, right? To go off of. And so that's one of the things. And so I think it's cool. I think it's interesting. So what I've got here, let me bring this up here. Okay. This is a theory that I found and then have done some more research on, and this is a more recent post. It's actually inside a bigger theory called Cain and the Disabled Ned. Although this person is making some serious stretches to get you to this point to where there is a character named Cain who basically escorts Ned. Right. And to meet with Robert Baratheon before he dies and all of these things. And he's trying to make this Cain and Abel analogy. And so I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm not going to dive into any of that, but it's the Abel parts that are wow, that's pretty interesting. So he says, and his name is M_Toodles. So actually, that sounds familiar. So he's actually, I think, won a few awards in the Reddit community. Yep. It says, as I'm reading a Game of Thrones for the umpteenth time, I keep noticing things I didn't either notice before or I have forgotten that I've noticed before. I picked up on this little delight yesterday, and I thought I would share. It says there are some pretty well-known and some famously suspected wordplay around the word Abel in A Song of Ice and Fire. That is Abel the verb, right? As you're the English teacher. Able.
Yeah.
He says, first we have Mance Raider, who's a bard, who disguises himself as a guy named Abel. Abel. So that is the pronoun Abel, right?
Yeah.
So which everybody and their sister recognizes as an anagram for Bael, as in Bael the Bard, right? Abel, Bael. But the most, we all know Bael the Bard, right? He says this is where he found something interesting. There's a moment where Dany is talking to Sir Barristan Selmy, and Barristan Selmy describes Rhaegar as something. Says Dany turned back to the squire. I know little of Rhaegar, only the tales Varys told, and he was a little boy when our brother died. What was he truly like? The old man considered a moment. Abel, that above all. Determined, deliberate, dutiful, single-minded. There is a tale of him, and doubtless Ser Jorah knows as well. So, some like to use this evidence that Mance is Rhaegar, since Rhaegar is Abel, as in Abel, the verb, and Mance is Abel, the pronoun. And again, both are anagrams of Bael the Bard. And that's pretty much a good place to kind of leave this, because then he goes into this big whole deal about he actually doesn't even believe in that, and he tries to make this Cain and Abel analogy, and I don't think it's necessarily all that great. However, Ez and I have been talking, and we have just been like spending over an hour looking up all sorts of different theories and things. So who knows where this conversation is going to go? But it's interesting in that Rhaegar Targaryen is specifically described as being able to do something. Barristan Selmy says that is, if I were to describe him in one word, above all, it is able. Now, does Rhaegar know that that's what Barristan Selmy thinks of him and then uses it, or is it that, or does Rhaegar, assuming again, so you have to make some systematic stretches here, and some things have to work for something. So a theory that I'm 100% on board with is that Rhaegar is Mance. So that theory has to in itself work. I'm 100% for that. I've said it a bunch of times. I 100% believe that is true. So then you get into this, then you can make the connections. Well, Rhaegar is Abel. Mance is Abel, Abel, which are both anagrams for Bael the Bard.
Yes, sir.
And so what are your kind of thoughts just on that, and then we can dive into some more stuff.
Yeah, I think when you said it, again, Abel describing someone, right? Describing someone, and then and that's the word above all, this adjective that describes Rhaegar, okay? Why that word? It's intentional. It's not just that you said, that he was. Let me hold on. Let me pull this up here. So you could have said
Webster's
that he was
dictionary.
Yeah. So when you look at Abel, right? You type it in first. Example: the dancers were very able, or technically very able, meaning they were talented or skillful or brilliant or clever or intelligent. Like there's other synonyms that you could use to describe. I mean, able covers quite a bit, which is awesome. So yeah, and if you're trying to make, and by the way, just to go back to that Cain and Abel reference, if you're trying to make a Cain and Abel reference between two characters and they were both torn over one thing, whether not maybe land, but a sister, right, of Ned, and which was be wife for Rhaegar. I mean, Eddard versus Rhaegar, Cain versus Abel type of thing. If you want to make those connections, they were a stretch, I think, when we read that theory, but still interesting. And then you specifically choose this as the word to describe him from one of the members of his Kingsguard who was there, who was at the tourney at Harrenhal, right? He was on the field. I think he was at the Trident, wasn't he? Didn't he surrender? Wasn't he one of those who was he was pardoned again by Robert Baratheon? And
yes,
so
he
on,
was.
but,
Barristan Selmy was at the Trident, not at the Tower of Joy.
Right, and because we know Jaime's the only one there with the Mad King. So interesting. Barristan has a lot of secrets, and there's a lot to tell, and you got to really pay attention. He stops short on Summerhall. I think he even stops short on some of Rhaegar's secrets and things like that. But to me, I love this. When you said Abel, and then we thought of, we know an Abel who goes to Winterfell, right? So we can get into all of that and all the connections between Bael the Bard and what Rhaegar himself did.
Right.
In terms
of
stealing.
Heads of a dragon, Abel, Bael.
Wow.
I mean, it's every word that you could make. It's every word that you could make out of it. So let me just read. I'm going to read here the legend of Bael the Bard. This is obviously from the wiki. So Bael the Bard was a king beyond the wall. According to legend, he was one of the greatest free folk raiders of his time. A man who outwitted the Northmen and impregnated the daughter of Lord Brandon Stark. He was also a singer who wrote songs about his own life, which are still sung to this day. According to the Free Folk legend, Lord Brandon Stark, the Liege of the North, once called Bael a coward. To take revenge on this affront and prove his courage, Bael climbed the wall, took the King's Road, and entered Winterfell under the guise of a singer named Sigric of Skagos, and Sigric means deceiver in the old tongue. There he sang until midnight for the Lord. Impressed by his skills as a singer, Lord Stark asked Bael what he wanted as a reward, but he requested only the most beautiful flower blooming in Winterfell's gardens. As the blue winter roses were just blooming, Brandon Stark presented him with one. So, obvious connections there to Lyanna. The following morning, the maiden daughter of Lord Stark had disappeared, his only child, and in her bed was a blue winter rose. Lord Brandon sent the members of the Night's Watch looking for them beyond the wall, but they never found Bael or the girl. The Stark line was on the verge of extinction when one day the girl was back in her room, holding in her arms an infant. That sounds familiar as well, with the Targaryen line being on the verge of extinction. They had actually never left Winterfell, staying hidden in the crypts. Bael's bastard with Brandon's daughter became the new Lord Stark. 30 years later, Bael was king beyond the wall and led the wildling army south. Sounds familiar. And he had to fight his own son at the Frozen Ford. Sounds familiar. There, incapable of killing his own blood, he let himself be killed by Lord Stark. Lord Snow. Make that connection. His son brought back Bael's head to Winterfell, and his mother, who had loved the Bard, seeing the trophy, killed herself by leaping from the top of a tower. Wow. The son was eventually slain by the Boltons. Now, that is something that Ygritte says. There's a few different tellings of it, so you do kind of had that. The legend of Bael the Bard is recalled in songs of the Free Folk. Ygritte learned the song from her mother, and Mance Rayder often sang it at the Shadow Tower after rangings. Bael is not mentioned in the old chronicles at Winterfell, and although Jon Snow learned stories from Maester Luwin and Old Nan, he had never heard of Bael before Ygritte's telling of the legend. Additionally, a time frame of Lord Brandon's existence is unclear. Ygritte claims Brandon lived a long time back, as both Brandon and his grandson are given the title Lord instead of King. It seems to indicate the disappearance of Brandon's daughter took place after the Starks had given up their kingship during Aegon's conquest. Furthermore, the King's Road is mentioned, implying that it took place after the reign of Jaehaerys the First Targaryen, during whose reign the King's Road was built. On the other hand, the story states that Bael's son was killed by one of his own lords who wore his skin afterwards. The habit of flaying an enemy and wearing the skin is practiced by the Boltons, but it is said they gave up the practice 1,000 years ago, although I don't buy that for a single second. So just a few more here. Some quotes. Some quotes here. Ygritte and Stone Snake. Well before, and then John's, around too. Well before he was king of the Free Folk, Bael was a great raider. Just keep in mind that word. A murderer, robber, and raper is what you mean. That's Stone Snake. Ygritte to Jon. So there it is. You have Bael's blood in you. Same as me. It never happened. Maybe it did. Maybe it didn't. It is a good song, though. Jon. Your Bael was a liar. No, but a bard's truth is different than yours or mine. So, Bael the Bard, is described as being a raider. Here you have a character named Mance Rayder. Right. So, you also have a character that there's a lot of similarities between Rhaegar and, the Bael the Bard story. I mean, the Blue Winter Roses, all of these things. We know that Rhaegar once read a book and then put down the book and picked up the sword. It's possible it was the first time he read this tale of Bael the Bard. Yes. So there's a lot of there's a lot of connections there. And again, I'm a big believer in the Rhaegar is Mance theory, because I think it serves really well the idea that Mance is actually up there training his son, Jon Snow. Jon doesn't necessarily know it. I think it's huge. I think it's key. I think it's 100% true. Now, remember, the last thing here in the show. Now, this is a total show-ism because things happen in the show, especially here, that do not happen in the books and will not happen in the books. And there is one thing that may happen in the books. So in the books, it is not Mance Rayder that is put on the pyre and burned alive, and Jon, so Jon shoots him, right, to get him to stop screaming because they want to keep it secret that Mance is still alive. In the show, before he is burned, Mance Rayder, who Jon has respect for, tells Jon, "I wish you good fortune in the wars to come." That is a show line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then Jon kills him, to save him from essentially being burned to death. So he gives him an easier death. At the Tower of Joy, it's said, "We looked for you on the Trident, but you were nowhere to be found," is what Ned Stark says to Arthur Dayne. Well, in the Bael the Bard story, they looked everywhere but could not find them.
That's right.
And then here's Lyanna hidden at this secret tower. You get there. Here's the woman with a baby. Ned and everybody gets there. Here's Lyanna and a baby with a baby. Mm-hmm. But Arthur Dayne says the same thing. He tells Ned Stark, "We wish you good fortune in the wars to come." Now, is that a total show word? Is that a total show line? Is that something that George told them is going to be an important line? I mean, obviously, you could say, well, it's a total showism because the Mance Rayder thing doesn't happen in the books that way, so we just made this line. We thought it was cool. You could say, what do we say to the God of Death? Well, George wrote that episode.
Yes, he did.
Remember, we talked about that a while back.
Yes, he did.
George wrote 4 episodes. He wrote the line, "What do we say to the God of Death? Not today." So is it? I mean, who knows? Who knows what they told him, right? You gotta think about these things. He was still writing, right? And up until season 4, and so there's just a lot of similarities between the Bael the Bard thing, but it's the Abel thing too was something that was like, wow, that's another connection that I never even thought about. I was already convinced, and now we have this too. So, Ez, I'll turn it over to you. I've given a lot of evidence and a lot of information here.
Yes, you have, and I you articulated it well. Here's the thing. So for me, what is very interesting is George has changed the story over time. It's evolved on him. It's gotten away from him. People theorize that in early Game of Thrones and Clash of Kings and so on, that he was in the back of his mind writing maybe towards the idea that Prince Rhaegar survives. The rubies, the glamours. I mean, all those different connections. I think that's interesting. I do think, as I'm thinking about it here, that I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. They knew there would be wars to come. And you could say it's a showism. I think George gave that to them. I don't think you have. I do not think, Sir Matt, that in the TV show showing us the Tower of Joy, the scene, the ultimate scene, every line said by Sir Arthur Dayne had better be ordained by George R.R. Martin. There is no way you're doing that on your own as Dan and Dave. And if they did, I just don't think so. It feels George. It feels like George. So when he says, "I wish you good fortune in the wars to come," and then Mance Rayder says it later as well, a wildling, a king beyond the wall, who does have a lot of these similar characteristics, the age, Rhaegar as he aged would be about the same age as Mance Rayder. I mean, that fits. Him being, a musician, a talented sort of musician, that fits. Him being able to rally and unite people. Rhaegar was well liked in that regard. Like, he could bring people together and tried. "I'm going to hold a great council one day," he told Jaime Lannister, "when I return, things will be different." I just think there's a lot that makes this interesting. If George abandoned it, that's one thing. But there's at least enough here to say that there's connections between Rhaegar and Mance, and those connections are made through the story of Bael the Bard. Mance is directly connected to Bael the Bard. Like, that looks very obvious. And even returning to Winterfell and things like that, it's too much. Rhaegar steals the Winter Rose, it being Lyanna, their most precious, right? Steals her, has a child with her. As you said, they can't find her. A war is started. There's a child named Jon Snow then who will later have to face his father, Rhaegar. You know what I mean? In the story of Bael the Bard, it was a bastard son who would later, Bael the Bard's son, who would become the Lord of Winterfell, who he would have to face. Now you have a similar situation where, I mean, it's similar. They're not exact, but if Jon, right, is if R plus L equals J, and Jon is Rhaegar's son, and Rhaegar is Mance, they're meeting again, just like Bael the Bard and his son did. You know, it's a strong, you can make a strong case for it, and it's very interesting. Is it just to throw us all off? It's too intricate. It's too intricate. It's too many layers and connections.
It is. And keep in mind too, the Bael the Bard story, right? Because we know that, and this is something I find so telling about it, is you have Mance Rayder, he is who's synonymous with the Bael the Bard story. He openly, talks about it, and he changes his name to Abel when he goes traveling because it's like the Bael the Bard story. Obviously, we know Bael the Bard is somebody who plays all
harp
of these,
or something.
The harp, I think he plays whatever. He plays a musical instrument. Yeah. And then you switch over and you say, okay, well, what about Rhaegar? Well, Rhaegar and Mance have their own similarities, let alone they have this also common similarity in Bael the Bard, in which, you look at some of the things Rhaegar did, and then they are, are the Blue Winter Roses and stealing the daughter and all of this stuff. That's very Bael the Bard. And then you have Mance Rayder, who is he talks about this the Bael the Bard and wants to do that thing. And then you look at all of these other Game of Thrones theories and Song of Ice and Fire theories and all of these things, and so much of it is hey, this is said here, this person is described as something here, and look at where it ties in here and here and here and here. And so the Abel, Bael, these anagrams of each other. Why is it, the fact of the matter is that if this were any other series, it's a coincidence, but it's not. It's not. It's George R.R. Martin who literally, we say this all the time, you have to pay attention to every word. I never even knew this thing existed until I read it, and I was already sold on the Mance theory. And then I read this today, and as and I are well, that seals it.
I said, read that again. And sometimes these even would come up in theory. It maybe has come across our plate before in a theory, but it really stood out to me this time where I was like, wait, what? The first word, most above all, he was described as Abel. Matt, come on. Who describes someone? I mean, just come on. Who describes Barristan? Seriously. If I want to Matt's an Abel guy. It does work. It does fit, but it's just wow, I don't know. It just, you're going to describe someone as above all else being a very able person. Just wild.
Right. What book is that too? That's the next book, right? That's Storm of Swords.
Which one? Where Barristan says that?
Where Barristan has that conversation with Dany?
Oh, I thought it was later, but maybe you're right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, because we'll find. Yeah. After Artiston is revealed.
I'll plug it into here to a search of Ice and Fire, and it'll come up. But keep in mind too, and Ez and I we like to bring this up, and this for me is a big thing. Within the first 5 chapters, Mance Rayder is mentioned time and time again. Mm-hmm. A character who we will not meet until the second, we will not meet him for a while. We know he's out there. We know he's this big important character. And he's literally, Ned Stark says, I may have to ride up to meet with this king beyond the wall.
Yes. Yes, he does. He says that. Yeah. Be careful, friend. I just typed in Abel, just the word Abel, into a search of Ice and Fire, and 154 things came up.
Well, I mean, yeah, that could be a lot of things.
Just yeah, I know. I just kind of interesting. Kingslayer Ned said, "Oh my God, he knew and Abel and Cretus made no doubt. He said carefully. Wow. Yeah, there's just different. You look at. I'm trying to find other connections for it. But anyways, yeah, no. This whole thing has been. This is what we do. We get into a search of Ice and Fire, and we start to just lose ourselves because of all the little one word connections. But I am. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention was. Oh gosh, you were.
It's a. Oh, I'm sorry. It's a Storm of Swords. Dany won. Yeah. So
Dany
that conversation, yes, has already happened. Yeah, it's where he saves her, and then they talk a little bit about it.
Yeah. So one thing you'd mentioned,
Storm of Swords. We haven't gotten there yet, but yes, it's coming up soon.
Yep. Okay. One thing you had mentioned about that Bael the Bard's son who becomes Lord of Winterfell was that he was later, according to Ygritte, was killed by a Bolton. Now, let's just follow me here for a second. If Rhaegar is air quote Bael the Bard later on as Mance and Abel, right? Let's just say, hear me out. Rhaegar is Bael. Bael has a bastard son. Okay, maybe he married that. Maybe he went beyond the wall and did a secret marriage. Who knows? Bastard doesn't matter. Took a winter rose. Bael did, and had a child. Rhaegar took a winter rose, had a child. Okay, now, so if Jon is that son, we already said father and son meet at the wall. Situation happens, break whatever. Ultimately, that son, it's going a little bit differently. I mean, he didn't kill Mance. He hasn't killed. So to fit the story perfectly, right? Jon, now in the show he did. In the show, he did kill his father. You know what I mean? If you're saying Mance, if you're saying
yes,
that Mance is Rhaegar, it was never revealed to us, but Jon shoots and kills Mance, who represents Rhaegar. Well, then that does fit. But Jon is actually killed by Boltons, by a pink letter, the bastard letter. And so that fulfills the other part, to the final piece to the Bael the Bard story, which is that Bael the Bard's son, who was the Lord of Winterfell, is eventually killed by the Boltons. And that actually happens to Jon. And it's like, you would think that last bit would not be that important, but it just happened in the book series. Like, the pink letter kills him.
Right. Well, keep in mind, in the Bael the Bard story, really quick here, right? It's actually a bastard who's running Winterfell, right? Because he sleeps with her or whatever. They find it. There's nothing to say. We don't know in the books yet. Assuming obviously that R plus L will equal J. I think that's like a given. That's not saying that Rhaegar had his marriage annulled, right? That we saw that in the show. So Jon could actually still be a bastard and the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna. That may not mean that he has the claim to the Iron Throne, but it could mean that he is still Azor Ahai or the Prince of His Promise or any of those things.
True. That's true. We don't know.
Which fits in with the Bael the Bard thing.
Story even more if it could be more closely tied to it than we know, because we're not through certain points in the books. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, man. It's all connected. It's all connected. It's just like, wow. And then I don't know if we want to dive into this now or in another video or episode, but there's things that we start to look at that so closely. See, you have in A Song of Ice and Fire, you have ice and you have fire. So you have Jon, who you're following, this whole Bael of the Bard situation, and then you have Dany with her dragons and fire. You have Westeros and Essos. You have the ebb and flow of the series, the back and forth. So we get tied up in all this Rhaegar stuff, and we start thinking about Lyanna and everything, and we're looking in the elements of ice and everything. And you go back to Jaehaerys, I think it was the second, whose children Rhaella, and Ares II. Ares II is the Mad King. That's the prophecy of this prince that was promised, right? So
Yes.
what's amazing to me is that we get all caught up in Rhaegar believed he either was the prince or he was going to father the prince. And Aemon tells us later, it's the old switcheroo. We were wrong about Rhaegar. It was his sister who was born at sea, air quote, on an island, right? Who was born in a storm. Melisandre prophesies that the prince that would be promised would be born a hero, reborn of the sea. You jokingly said the only person I know reborn of the sea was Patchface, but isn't that a George thing to do, right? To say, like, we got to start believing by a dance. We need to start getting some answers. We've been led along for several books. If by a dance we're not getting some of the answers, then this is never wrapping up. You know what I mean? You got to start to tie things up. So you start to say, where are some things coming back together? And the story's not just continuing to spread and spread and spread. And I kind of think this whole prince and princess thing is starting to come to a Aemon Targaryen, Maester Aemon is correct in Dany. And that Rhaegar was wrong, he still is a part of it. You know what I mean? And actually, you know what? The crazy thing is, if you want to get to the whole Dany and Jon situation, them getting together in the books and them being, they're still a continuation of that same line, and the Woods Witch prophecy, that they would have a child that would be the prince or princess that's promised. I mean, maybe Aemon's wrong and Rhaegar's wrong, and they're all wrong, and it's still a prophecy. It's a prophecy that we've been trying to fulfill for it's an ancient prophecy. We don't even know its origins. Melisandre has an idea. The Targaryens have ideas about it. We don't even know. Rhaegar just became obsessed with it. And then ironically, Aemon is trying to make Dany, well, she fits, Yes. She has 3 dragons. The dragons prove that. It's like, it's just so wild. It's just such a wild thing that we got to start to believe somebody, and somebody's got to have the answers to some of this. Or the answer is, it's just a damn prophecy, and it's not going to be fulfilled through it. Maybe their line, it's generations down through their line. That Woods Witch says something, and we think, it's the next several generations. It could be thousands of years. Why not? Why does it have to be fulfilled now? The comet. What's interesting about the comet is Rhaegar believed that his son Aegon was born, and there was a comet when Aegon Targaryen was born. Rhaegar says that. He believed his son, that the comet gave it away. Now another comet shows up, man. And we're saying that's proof right there. Another one will come again. It's just kind of like, so anyways.
Where do we go?
It's a never ending sort of thing. Everyone trying to, I think George, it's a frustrating thing that George does. I don't think he believes in I don't think, the whole idea that you can prophesy and foretell something. I think you have powers and abilities like life, blood, and things. We see resurrections. We see things like that. But is the Woods Witch really telling the truth? She just says stuff, and we make things fit to what she says. But is it actually what she was talking about? You'd have to go back to her and say, hey, so that dream you told us about Jingle Bells, was this the guy you were talking about? And if she shakes her head and says, yeah, that's it, then we're good. But we never, ever get that. And we never will.
We never will. Never will, guys. So, hey, let us know. What do you think? Is Mance Abel? Is Mance Bale?
Wow.
Or is Rhaegar Abel? Are they, is it Abel, and Bale? And the Bael the Bard, and how does it all connect? And Ez and I are going to be doing a couple more of these because there's a lot of things to talk about. So we appreciate you guys supporting us here on Patreon. As we always say, it is an enormous help to us to continue the show, making it better and better and better. So we do appreciate that, guys. So stay tuned. We will see you soon. And remember that winter is coming.